Okay, you guys, I'm going to repeat the demonstration from this morning so that you can refer back to it. I chose some colors that are good contrast and also compatible in case they ended up being mixed together. Remember, polymer clay acts like paint, or I should say it works like paint. So if you mix yellow and red together, you'll get orange. If you mix black in with blue, you'll get a darker blue. So you want to try to stay away from mixing colors that are opposite on the color wheel. Otherwise, you'll end up with kind of a muddy grayish brown color. So anytime you're using your scraps, make sure that blending scraps together, for example, like these are just scrap red and orange, and if I mix them together, I'm going to get a reddish orange. So, so the other thing we talked about this morning is that the clay is oil-based, so you need to condition it before you start. And if you hold it in your hand and it warms up, it'll be easier and more malleable for conditioning. So initially, because it's been sitting in a package, it's pretty hard. But the second or the minute it warms up, it starts to get more squishy and ability to start blending it and conditioning it. And the other thing to keep in mind too is that some colors condition more quickly than others. So I had some kind of off-white clay this morning that conditioned really quickly, but then the red took a lot longer. So, so sometimes it depends on the brand and sometimes it depends on the color. So I'm just kind of blending these two together. Let's give me another option. So we talked about either using sheets or canes with your polymer clay. And a sheet is when you just roll out something flat, and a cane is when it's like a candy cane and it's rolled up in a spiral or a circle. So the first cane that I showed you how to make was a spiral cane, because that's the easiest one. So I'm going to try to do this around the tripod. And I'm using my acrylic roller on the acrylic plexiglass sheet. And you can be a little bit more aggressive with your rolling. I'm just trying to work in between legs on a short tripod, and it's a little awkward. So I'm rolling it out until it's about 1/16 of an inch thick, which is pretty thin. I'm trying to keep it consistent. And the reason why it's marbling already is because this was the one that I was just mixing up with the red and the orange together, but it'll work. So there's that. And then I'm going to roll out the black. Not so much black. And like I said this morning too, if you push it down a little bit before you start rolling it, kind of flatten it, it'll make the rolling out easier. And I'm trying to get a pretty consistent thickness between the two sheets that I'm rolling out. But with the spiral, it doesn't matter too much because of the fact that if it's one line weight with spiral is thicker than the other line weight with spiral, it just makes a more interesting spiral too, so it's not that big of a deal. All right, so I've got orange and black Still Spirits. And I'm going to put down the larger sheet on the bottom, and these are both almost the same, so it doesn't matter too much. But I'm going to line up. And then your slicer is in an envelope, and there's usually some masking tape over the top so that you don't cut yourself. But this is super, super sharp, so you want to be really careful with it. And then, like I said this morning too, if you have pets or younger siblings, always make sure to just put it back in the envelope and put it far, far away, because the last thing you want is somebody, you know, like your dog or cat, to get a hold of it and cut their mouth. So I'm just cutting off the extra and make it into a little rectangle. And then you're going to go probably long side, rolling from the short side, I should say. And then first just kind of get it into a tight circle, and then just evenly push up into a coil. And then cut off the extra. And then just kind of roll it a little bit just to kind of compress it, but don't push too hard or it'll end up just being squished out of shape like that. So So there's my short spiral. If I had a bigger rectangle, I would keep going. So this is like your standard size cane, like a Tootsie Roll size, but you can reduce it. Actually, let me cut a couple of these off first. When you're slicing off your canes, you want to make them as thin as you can. Another, probably 1/16 of an inch, because then when you add them to something, they won't add a lot of extra bulk and they won't distort too much too. Okay, so I've got 3 that I cut off, and now I'm going to reduce this, and to do that you're just going to gently roll and apply just a little bit of pressure, and because of the pressure that you're applying, it's going to get smaller and smaller. So I'll cut a couple of these. You can see the size difference already, and then I can reduce it even more. Because I'm going to use this cane for some other okay, so 3 little bitty ones too. There. Okay, so I'm going to save that cane, like I said, for later. I also have some yellow that I've conditioned, and I'm just going to roll that out. Some of this off. So this one was the kaleidoscope, and this one starts out with either a cane that you created or solid colors or gradations or anything, and just multiple pieces that are the same length but different widths. So right now these ended up being the same width too. So I'm going to cut some of this off and keep rolling it out so that I have a skinnier yellow. Okay, so now it's skinnier than my first one. So I'm going to cut off the extra because they need to be the same length. And then I'll go into this off-white color too. Maybe make this one even smaller. And with this kaleidoscope one, you can stop at 3 or sometimes go to 5, depending on what your canes look like and how much contrast you have between your colors. So if you have limited colors, stopping at 3 is usually good. I think I sent white home with everybody too, so you can always make a lighter version of one of your colors or a couple of your colors too, just by mixing the white with the color like paint. Okay, so I'm trying to make this just a little skinnier than the yellow. And like I said before too, when you're rolling these out, you want to keep it consistent pressure so that you don't end up with a really skinny middle and then fat on the ends. Okay, so they're all the same length. So now I'm going to first roll these together. Oops, there goes my camera. There we go. Now the leg is right in there, so gives me a little more space. But all right, so you're gonna roll these together, and then and I'm gonna cut off the ends just to make it even, and then kind of press it into a triangle. So I usually start by just kind of squeezing together one end into a triangular shape like that, and then using that shape to press and pinch along my board to carry the triangle through the whole thing. And then peel it up and kind of rotate it, because the parts that you pinched are probably kind of wobbly. And then peel it up and rotate it to the third side. Okay, so then we needed 6 of these. So I'm going to cut it in half initially. And if you want to measure it, that's fine. I'm just going to eyeball it. So now I have 6 pieces. And then you're going to match them up so that they reflect each other. And the yellow and the off-white aren't really that dramatic. I probably should have gone with a deeper color, but you get the idea. So then this side has to match, oops, let's see, where am I? There, like that. So that gives me the first three, and then this one is the reflection. So like every other one is reflecting the last one. You have to make sure that you don't accidentally turn it upside down when you're squishing it on there. So this one actually needs to be rotated like this because it was completely off. And then this one goes like this. So there's the kaleidoscope. And you kind of have to push it gently together to get rid of that inside gap that tends to form. It almost looks like a little flower because I only used 3. The more you use, the more elaborate your kaleidoscope gets. So there that is. So I'm going to actually cut one of those off really thin, probably about a 1/16 of an inch. Save that for later. And then I'm going to reduce this by rolling it and applying lighter pressure. I can save that one for later. Okay, and then the other one that I showed you was marbling. So I'm actually going to use the scrap from my spiral earlier as one of my canes. And with marbling, if you start with 3 different colors, contrasting colors, and then have 3 different widths of coils or canes, but the same length. So I've got white, I've got my scrap, and they're different weights, and then maybe I'll do, this yellow is so stiff, maybe I'll just do orange on its own. And make sure that they're dramatically different enough in the width so that your marble looks believable and it doesn't just look like clay that's been rolled around. And if I did send home white with yours, if you do one of the canes that's just pure white, that always looks good too, because that's kind of how marble ends up in its natural form. Okay, so I've got skinny orange, off-white, and then my scrap one that I just rolled into a cane randomly. So this one you start with twisting it, like that. Then you're gonna roll it to kind of get it back into a coil or a cane. And roll it till it's pretty thin, not quite as thick as a Tootsie Roll. And make sure that you're not mixing it as you're rolling it, that you're just applying pressure, because the pressure is what's going to cause the gradation, and the gradation is what makes it look like marble. So then I'm going to fold this in half again and coil it. And then I'm going to roll this. And depending on what colors you used and how soft your clay is, you might have to do this, 5 times. 3 times, it really depends. Since I started out with a scrap color, it's going a little faster. So I'm going to fold that one in half and then twist it. And then this might be my last. And then on this last time, I'm just, actually, let me just do one more, because I can start to see the gradations on the outside, but one more time will make it even better. The thing that you want to make sure you don't do is do it so many times that your clay just ends up all mixing together the same color. Okay, so I've got this, my last one. I'm going to roll it just to kind of get it together again. Okay, so now I'm going to press this down a little bit flatter, and I'm going to cut it in half and then move the two halves next to each other. I'm just going to flip it over because that'll make it easier to pick up later. So then this is what I want to roll out to make my sheet of marble. This color's actually worked out pretty good. I was a little nervous about it being too yay Cedarburg, but because of the gradation that develops from using the different colors, the marble looks good. So, so like I said, my plan was to have you do an Altoid box cover, which I included a video on Canvas. And if you find a different project that you like better, then, you know, go ahead and do that. As long as you just, you know, finish something that you like. There's a ton of tutorials on the internet, on Pinterest. There's just like an endless amount. You could do this every day for the next 3 years and never get through all the tutorials. So, you know, that's something that you could do to start with, or you could just follow these sheet methods and then eventually make an Altoid box, which I think I have one in here. So if you are making a sheet for an Altoid box, you want to make sure that you roll it out, that it actually, you know, fits the right size. So you kind of have to do some pre-planning. If you're just a little bit short, you can always add even just solid clay to the edges. So I'm just going to add like a little thin piece here. And then when you roll that out, it'll just integrate into your the rest of your piece. So if you are a little bit short on your edges and you just want to cover it with a marble sheet, you know, that's a really good way, an easy way to just kind of finish up. The other thing with marble sheets too is if you add another marble sheet to it, it still looks correct because marble changes veins a lot. And then the other thing I showed you this morning too is how another way to integrate your canes into sheets. So let me just roll out some black. And I usually try to keep it about 1/16 of an inch, you know, real thin, because it's just, it's easier to manipulate, especially pushing it around corners or anything like that. And I can put these down. Some of my spirals from before. So whenever you put a cane onto a sheet, then finish up by rolling it, and that'll, you know, make it all one surface again. It's nice and flat. So you'll get a little bit of a distortion, but it also makes it look really interesting too. Like, this makes me think if I would have used peacock feather colors, then these would look like little peacock feathers in the black. So, you know, just something to think of. Now they kind of look like modern little roses. So now this sheet is all just integrated together flat. And I could keep building that up and then eventually have this too. So I think that about covers it. The only thing, remember, when you're watching the video, stop about 6.5 minutes in where she starts talking about the baking of it, because I want to bake it for you. And that's the same if you do the Altoid box and cover the Altoid box, bring it back to school and I'll bake it. Or if you make anything else too, like if you're making a piece of jewelry or beads or something that you found online, bring those back and I'll bake it, because there's a good chance, I mean, it's really easy to burn if you haven't done this enough. And it also emits a really strong smell, like it's very chemically smelling. So you want to do it in some place that's vented, and we're vented really well over here. So, so that's why it just makes more sense. I'm not going to burn it, and we are vented. So, so once you're finished, then you'll just have to drop it off with the people at the door, and they'll bring it to me to bake. So, so that's about it for today. I'm going to do a couple of demonstrations on other techniques, probably next week. But in the meantime, do some searches online and see if there's anything else that you can find, and decide on what you're going to make. All right, good luck.